The atmosphere inside the Sovereign Airways lounge at Heathrow was designed to be a vacuum of peace, a meticulously curated sanctuary of brushed gold, velvet partitions, and the faint, expensive scent of sandalwood. In this space, the chaos of the world was meant to cease. For Elena Vance, a woman who treated her platinum membership like a holy relic, this was her inner sanctum. However, as she settled into her high-backed armchair, her gaze snagged on a sight that, to her, felt like a glitch in the Matrix. Near the floor-to-ceiling window sat a young woman, barely 20, with her hair braided into intricate shimmering patterns. She was hunched over a leather-bound sketchbook, her fingers moving with a fluid, practiced precision as she sketched the silhouette of a taxiing dreamliner. To Elena, the girl's presence was a jagged tear in the fabric of exclusivity. She didn't see a fellow passenger. She saw an interloper, Elena's husband Marcus, a man who seemed to have spent the last decade apologizing for his wife's existence, adjusted his expensive watch, and tried to steer her toward the buffet. But Elena remained anchored, her eyes narrowed. The girl was dressed in a simple, oversized charcoal hoodie and matching joggers, her feet tucked into thick cream-colored wool socks. There was not a single designer logo visible, no flash of gold, nothing to signal the appropriate level of wealth. "Marcus, look at this." Elena hissed, her voice cutting through the hushed murmur of the room like a serrated blade. "Standards are absolutely plummeting. This isn't a bus station. I pay $40,000 a year for this membership, so I don't have to sit next to this." The girl, whose name was Amara, didn't look up. She simply flipped a page in her sketchbook, the charcoal pencil scratching a rhythmic, soothing sound. Elena marched toward the marble service desk, her heels clicking with aggressive authority. The lounge manager, a man named Julian, who had mastered the art of the invisible bow, looked up with a practiced smile. "Madam Vance, a pleasure to see you again. Your usual vintage is irrelevant, Julian." Elena interrupted, gesturing vaguely but pointedly toward the window. "What is that child doing in here? This is a first-class sanctuary. Surely there has been a mistake with her boarding pass, or perhaps she's a stowaway from the terminal." Julian didn't even glance toward Amara. He kept his eyes locked on Elena's. "I can assure you, madam, every guest in this lounge has the absolute right to be here. Now about that champagne." "I want her out," Elena snapped, her voice rising just enough to make a nearby businessman look up from his tablet. "It's a matter of security. She looks suspicious. She's probably recording people. I don't feel safe." Amara finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, deep pools of brown that betrayed no anger, only a weary sort of observation. She closed her sketchbook with a soft thud and stood up. She didn't speak, she simply walked past Elena, giving her a wide berth, and headed toward the boarding gate. "See," Elena whispered triumphantly to Marcus. "She knows she doesn't belong." Guilty conscience 3 hours later. The drama shifted 30,000 feet into the sky. The Sovereign Airways flight to New York was a masterclass in aeronautic luxury. Elena was in Scaxton Suite 1A, a private pod with a lie-flat bed and a personal wardrobe. She was sipping a glass of rare whiskey when she saw a figure walk past her open suite door. It was her, the girl from the lounge. Amara didn't stop at the curtain leading to the lower cabins. Instead, she turned left, disappearing into the ultra-exclusive owner's studio. At the very front of the aircraft, a space so private it wasn't even listed on the public seating map, Elena's face contorted. She hit the call button with such force it nearly cracked the plastic. A senior flight attendant, a woman named Sarah with 20 years of experience, appeared instantly. "Yes, Madam Vance, that girl." Elena pointed a trembling finger toward the front of the plane. "She just went into the crew-restricted area or the owner's suite. You need to stop her. She's clearly trying to find a place to hide. I told the manager at the lounge she was a security risk." Sarah's expression didn't flicker. "Madam, that passenger is exactly where she is supposed to be." "Don't be ridiculous," Elena scoffed. "Do you know who I am? My husband's firm handles the logistics for half the ports in Europe. I want that girl moved to the back of the plane. In fact, I want her detained when we land. I will be filing a formal complaint against this entire crew for negligence." Sarah took a slow, deliberate breath. "Madam, I would highly suggest you return to your suite and enjoy the flight. For your own sake, is that a threat?" Elena shrieked. The cabin, usually a tomb of silence, was now vibrating with her rage. "I want to speak to the captain now." "The captain is currently occupied with takeoff procedures," Sarah said coldly. "However, the passenger you are referring to has requested that I deliver a message. If you continue this line of inquiry." Sarah pulled a small, heavy card from her pocket. It was embossed with the Sovereign Airways crest in silver. On the back, in elegant looping script, were 5 words. "The view is better from the top." Elena stared at the card, her brain struggling to bridge the gap between the hoodie-wearing child and the silver embossed authority in her hand. "Who is she?" Marcus whispered. Peering over his wife's shoulder, "She is Amara Sovereign," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, lethal pitch. "The granddaughter of the man whose name is on the tail of this aircraft. She is the majority shareholder of this airline, and as of 3 minutes ago, she used the onboard satellite link to contact our legal department." The color drained from Elena's face, leaving it a sallow, sickly gray. The luxury of the suite suddenly felt like a cage. The flight lasted 7 hours. For Elena, it was a slow-motion execution. Every time a flight attendant walked by, they didn't offer a refill or a warm towel. They simply looked through her as if she had already ceased to exist. When the wheels touched down at JFK, the usual scramble to deplane didn't happen. The captain's voice came over the intercom. But it wasn't the usual weather update. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a minor administrative matter to attend to. Please remain in your seats. Port Authority officers will be boarding momentarily to escort 2 passengers off the aircraft for a mandatory interview regarding a reported incident of targeted harassment." Elena felt the walls closing in. 2 officers in dark uniforms appeared at the door of her suite. They didn't ask, they commanded. Marcus was LED out first, his head bowed in absolute disgrace, followed by Elena, whose legs felt like lead. As they were marched through the jet bridge, they passed the private exit for the owner's studio. Amara was standing there, her leather backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked exactly as she had in the lounge, unbothered, quiet and profoundly powerful. She didn't say a word as Elena was LED past. She didn't need to. The silence was the heaviest punishment. But the nightmare was only beginning. By the time Elena and Marcus reached the customs hall, the digital world had already done its work. Amara hadn't just called legal. She had sent a short, grainy video of Elena's lounge tirade to the airline's board of directors. As Elena sat in a cold, fluorescent-lit intake room, her phone began to vibrate incessantly. It was a flurry of emails. The first was from the Sovereign Airways Global Membership Division. "Your lifetime membership has been revoked. You are permanently blacklisted from all sovereign properties, hotels, and aircraft. Your remaining miles have been donated to a racial justice charity." In your name. The second email was from Marcus, from the board of his own logistics firm. "Due to the high-profile nature of the incident involving Sovereign Airways, our primary transport partner, we are placing you on immediate administrative leave, pending a termination review. Your presence is no longer required." Elena sat in the plastic chair, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. She had spent a lifetime building a tower of perceived superiority, only to realize she had built it on sand. 1 year later, the world had moved on. Amara Sovereign was featured on the cover of a major business magazine, hailed as a visionary who was diversifying the tech and travel industries. Her sketches from that flight had been turned into a series of murals that adorned airports across the globe, symbols of inclusion and the beauty of the journey. In a small, cramped apartment in a suburb far from the glittering lights of Manhattan, Elena Vance sat at a laminate kitchen table. She was wearing a faded, nondescript sweater and thick socks. She was looking at a pile of past due bills and a flyer for a local job fair. Her expensive jewelry had been sold months ago to cover the legal fees from the harassment suit. Her friends, the people she had fought so hard to impress with her exclusivity, had vanished the moment her name became synonymous with the lounge lady. There was a knock at the door. It was the mailman with a small package. Inside was a single framed print she had ordered with the last of her discretionary money. It was a copy of a famous sketch, a dreamliner taxiing toward a sunset, drawn with fluid charcoal lines. At the bottom of the print, the artist's signature was bold and clear, "Amara Sovereign." Elena hung the picture in her small hallway. Every day as she left for her shift at a local grocery store, she had to look at it. It was a constant reminder that the world doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest or pay the most for a seat. It belongs to those who move through it with grace, and to those who understand that a person's worth can never be measured by the color of their socks or the lack of a logo on their chest. The woman who thought she owned the sky had finally learned how it felt to walk on the ground. She had sought to diminish a stranger, and in doing so, she had completely erased herself. The justice wasn't just in the loss of her money or her status. It was in the absolute, crushing realization that she had been the one who didn't belong all along.